Hello everyone. Today we are going to start about the embroidery threads and needles which we want to use for doing your hand and machine embroidery. Threads for embroidery to be used for both hand and machine. Actually there is a saying like ornaments makes a woman look more beautiful. In the same way, embroidery threads, which is considered as the most important one, which makes the fabrics or the articles to look more brighter, or it is the one which makes the fabrics to look more beautiful. Beauty to the fabric can be done by means of embroidery threads. Value of the fabric is actually done by using embroidery threads. And also, to attract the customers, embroidery threads plays a vital role in attracting the customers. You may think the design which you have selected for doing your embroidery plays a role in attracting the customers. It is not the case what you think. Actually, the embroidery threads which we are using for our hand and machine embroidery plays a vital role to attract the customers, to make them purchase the products or the articles which we are done with the embroidery. And before going into the embroidery threads, you have to know what are the applications of embroidery threads. We are using embroidery threads in most of products, not only in costumes. We are using for many products which we are using in our day-to-day life. Coming to the foremost things and costumes, we use in saris and ladies and gents dresses in common, and we have using this embroidery threads in woven garments, knitted garments, leather articles, and in logos. In particular, while seeing these applications, for example, if you are seeing logos, we have brand t-shirts where the brand is given in the t-shirt in terms of using embroidery threads. It plays a vital role. In order to project the brand, we are using embroidery threads to showcase our brand name. In case of leather articles, we have many leather accessories like handbags, footwears, wallets. All we are using leather materials where we are finding such embroidery works even in footwears, which attracts the customers to purchase the products. That is what the embroidery find its application and demand among the customers in every day-to-day life. And by knowing this application, you have to think what is the embroidery is available for. These embroidery threads are available for what kind of works. These embroidery threads are available for doing hand embroidery, crocheting, and single head computer embroidery machine, then multi-head computer embroidery machine. We have high-speed multi-needle computerized embroidery machine. So we are using these embroidery threads for doing hand embroidery as well as machine embroidery. That you have to know in order to study about the embroidery threads. Before going into the types of embroidery threads, you should know, in order to manufacture or to produce the embroidery threads, what kind of yarns we have to prefer. So from the yarn only we will make, from the fiber only we used to make yarn. From yarn we are going to some other processes. Coming to the fibers, what you have to know is what kind of fibers can be preferred to make this embroidery threads, like cotton, synthetic, and regenerated fibers. So selecting these fibers depends upon the necessity or requirement of the customers for doing the embroidery work. What is the requirement? It may be according to the need of the customers, according to the design which we are going to do the embroidery, according to the fabric type we have chosen to do our embroidery work. It all decides what kind of fibers we have to choose for doing our or to manufacture our embroidery threads. That you have to keep in mind before selecting your embroidery threads if you are in the process of manufacturing embroidery threads. Why I am saying this kind of technical works in surface embellishment is when you are going to start a business, when you are planning to have a business of starting manufacturing embroidery threads, you should know what kind of fibers you have to choose for manufacturing this embroidery threads. There it plays a vital role, or it gives you knowledge about what kind of fibers are needed to manufacture the demand embroidery threads. Everyone should be appropriate. The kind of the kind of fiber matches with the kind of thread which are in demand. That you should know in prior before going to process or manufacture your embroidery threads. And coming to the next one, we are going to see types of embroidery threads. There are actually 5 types of embroidery threads which we are using in our day-to-day life for doing either hand embroidery or machine embroidery. Coming to the first one, cotton embroidery threads. Continuous filament embroidery threads. Spun polyester embroidery threads, and we have rayon embroidery threads, and finally we have metallic embroidery threads. These are the 5 most type of embroidery threads we are using in doing our embroidery work for both hand and machine embroidery. Coming to the cotton embroidery threads, there are main criteria you have to know in mind if you are going to manufacture or you are going to select threads for doing your embroidery work. This cotton embroidery thread are mostly made up of good quality cotton. Actually, this cotton goes under the process called mercerization, where a certain chemical process take place which makes the cotton fibers to improve its luxure and softness. Actually, for embroidery, what you have to keep in mind is the thread which we use for your embroidery should be very luster, and it should have some soft feel and better strength. Why we have to consider these three most important parameters for embroidery is luster is to attract the article. It makes the fabric or the product which we are doing embroidery to look very beauty, or it adds value to the fabric in which we are doing our embroidery. So luster is the foremost thing we have to keep in mind while choosing your embroidery threads for your embroidery work. Softness is nothing but comfort is first priority for everyone. So in embroidery also, softness is considered as foremost one for doing the embroidery. And strength is nothing but you have to think in general. If the thread is having enough strength, we feel comfort for doing your embroidery work either in hand or machine embroidery. If we are doing in hand embroidery, in our hand embroidery, we are going to pull and push our thread up and down to complete our embroidery design. So pulling and pushing our embroidery thread up and down, the thread should have the enough strength to withstand while doing the embroidery work. And also the strength influences the life of the embroidery design. And when we are going with the machine embroideries, while we are feeding the thread in the machine, it should have the enough strength for running the machine for doing the embroidery work. That is what we have to concentrate on: luster, softness and better strength for both machine and hand embroidery works. And this cotton embroidery threads, as I said, it goes under mercerization process, which makes the fibers to get luster and brightness to attract the embroidery thread. Yeah. And what is the other things we have to concentrate is this cotton embroidery thread is used for both hand embroidery and machine embroidery. And one more thing, this cotton embroidery threads, we have to consider counts. You might have learnt in your testing subjects about the count, like text, denier, all kind of things. What you have to keep in mind for this embroidery thread is what count the thread should have in order to start for the embroidery work. Suppose 2 cross 40s count, 2 cross 60s count, 2 cross 80s count, 1 cross 6 counts, all shows the thread count with ply. You all know ply is nothing but the twist that is applied in the yarn, or the number of the number of yarns present over there. So that implies here plies in the counts. You want to know what kind of count need to be used for which kind of embroidery threads. As I said earlier, in order to manufacture any embroidery threads, you should know the count of the embroidery threads accordingly to manufacture accordingly. So this kind of 2 into 40s count, 2 into 60s count or 80s counts, all considered for both hand embroidery and machine embroidery. In machine embroidery, it can be preferred for high speed multi-needle embroidery machines. So that is what the first type, cotton embroidery thread, where you have to keep in mind is cotton embroidery threads are preferred for both hand embroidery and machine embroidery. And this cotton embroidery threads are expected to have softness and luster, which can be improved by the mercerization process, where the fiber undergoes some process which makes the yarn to look more lustrous and have better strength. And coming to the next type, it is second type, continuous filament yarn embroidery threads. For this continuous filament embroidery threads, we need polyester fibers to manufacture this continuous filament embroidery threads. And another most parameter what you have to keep in mind is this polyester fibers should have pentalobal or trilobal cross section, which makes the fiber to look much brighter, or it increases the brightness. So for this continuous filament embroidery threads, we should make this embroidery threads by means of using polyester fibers, where the polyester fibers has pentalobal and trilobal cross section, which makes the yarn to look brighter or even more brighter than what it is already. So, and also what you have to have in mind is the count of the thread is 120 into 2 denier is preferred for this kind of continuous filament embroidery threads, which can be used in machine embroidery. For multi-head embroidery machine, you can prefer 20 into 2 denier yarn fiber count, so that you can manufacture continuous filament embroidery threads which matches to run in a multi-head embroidery machines. And you might have a question like, why this polyester fibers used to manufacture this continuous filament embroidery threads should have the pentalobal or trilobal cross sections? Actually, let me explain what is this pentalobal and trilobal cross section. This trilobal is, as the name implies, the structures have like trilobal structure, where you can have the structure like triangle shape. We have a triangle shape cross section, where this trilobal cross sections have increased surface area, where it provides space for the polymerization process, which takes place in a better manner in both this penta and trilobal manner. Pentalobal is, as the name implies, it has 5 sections, pentalobal structure. These both trilobal and pentalobal cross sections have a increased surface area compared to circular cross section, where circular cross section of the fibers will be in a congested way, where we don't find a surface area in an increased manner, where we can find it increased in pentalobal and trilobal structure. And also for the process of brightening the luster or the softness, this pentalobal and trilobal cross sections undergo mercerization process, where TiO2, titanium dioxide, is not added during the during mercerization process. as I said, in order to improve the luster and softness of the fiber, we are undergoing the fiber with the mercerization process, which increases the softness and lusters of the fiber. In this continuous filament embroidery thread process, where these fibers having pentalobal and trilobal structures undergoes mercerization process, where this titanium dioxide is not added, which makes the fiber to look brighter and lustrous. That is what we are going with this pentalobal and trilobal structures compared to the circular cross section. You may think why we have to know in detail about the yarns that are used for manufacturing this embroidery threads. Why I am saying in detail about all this kind of yarn and thread is you have to know the thread types or the yarn count, because even though you are not going to start a business or you are not going to use anything, you have to have something in your mind about the count of the thread and embroidery thread types, at least to purchase what kind of thread you are in need of doing your embroidery work. Suppose you are planning to do a simple embroidery work for your kurti, what kind of thread you have to choose according to the fabric of your kurti. We have different fabric materials where cotton, synthetic, all kind of materials we are getting in the dress materials, right? For the appropriate fabric you have in mind, you should be in a situation or the position to choose your thread to do your embroidery work. That is what I am explaining in detail about the pentalobal or trilobal structures in which the polyester fiber increases the luster and softness of the thread, embroidery thread. For example, if you are going to do embroidery for your cotton material, but you have a plan of doing your embroidery with nice lustrous feel of the thread, you have to choose this kind of continuous filament embroidery thread which has softness and lustrous, which makes your embroidery to look more attractive what you are expecting. That is what you have to know, all kind of embroidery threads which you have to prefer for doing your embroidery work. And at the same time, if you are going to start your lecture or you are going to start your business in manufacturing embroidery threads, you should know all these kind of simple terms or the basic technology things to start your business of manufacturing embroidery threads. That is what the need of knowing all this fiber and the embroidery details for this surface embellishment course. And coming to the third one, it is spun polyester embroidery threads. Coming to the spun polyester embroidery threads, what strikes is this spun polyester embroidery threads are used in under threading. You may think what is under threading? It is nothing but thread which can be used in bobbin. So you may all aware like we need to have two threads, one for the bobbin and one for the needle for doing our embroidery work in case of going with machine embroidery. So this kind of spun polyester embroidery threads which are used as under threading, that is bobbin thread. We are preferring this spun polyester embroidery threads as bobbin threads for doing a machine embroidery. This spun polyester embroidery threads are manufactured as like polyester fibers or the yarns. And coming to the next one, we have rayon embroidery threads. This rayon embroidery threads, actually these rayon embroidery threads are the mostly preferred embroidery threads because of its shine, brilliance, color availability, all considered as the foremost thing that is needed for the embroidery thread. So this embroidery threads made of rayon is most preferred for both hand and machine embroidery. These rayon embroidery threads are available in various sizes. As I said, you have to notify the sizes in terms of count, like hundreds 2 ply, 150s into 2 ply, or 180s into single ply. These are the various sizes that are available in rayon embroidery threads, which we can prefer according to our requirement. And the next one is what we are going to see is one more thing what we have to keep in mind is this rayon embroidery threads are little costlier than polyester embroidery threads. So what we can prefer is we can go to prefer polyester filament yarns because it is cheaper than rayon, and also the most important one that is available with this polyester filament yarn is, as I said earlier, by having pentalobal and trilobal cross section, this polyester filament provides more luster and brightness to the yarn which we need for doing our embroidery work. So before preferring rayon, it was polyester which was in demand for doing our embroidery for machine works. And in the faster world, in the machine embroidery, we are expecting the machine to run as fast as possible to have more than 1000 stitches per minute. So in order to have 1000 stitches per minute, we should have the threads in a manner that have enough or better strength where it should not break, which disturbs the continuity of the embroidery in machine. So we should prefer, or we should choose the threads which have better strength to do the machine embroidery works. Compared to rayon, this polyester filament yarns are preferred for machine embroideries for its characteristics like better abrasion resistance, color fastness, and better strength. Abrasion resistance, color fastness, and better strength makes the polyester filament yarns to be chosen for our machine embroidery works. And next what we are going to see this metallic embroidery threads. This is, you might have seen in your costumes, this metallic embroidery threads which gives a glittering effect. Like the thread looks very shiny in golden color, which is called as metallic embroidery threads, and it has some rough feel while touching, but it is not a matter. It is having some glittering effect which makes the embroidery yarn to look more attractive and brighter, which is needed for our most of the embroidery works. These metallic embroidery threads are having various types, or I will say you few. Unsupported metallic embroidery, supported metallic embroidery, twisted metallic embroidery. We have many more also. These different varieties and types of metallic embroidery threads have different counts, and these counts are chosen according to the requirement of the buyer or the designer. This is what the 5 types of embroidery threads. I will recall the 5 ones. First one is cotton embroidery threads, and second is continuous filament embroidery thread. Third one is spun polyester embroidery threads. Fourth is rayon embroidery threads. Fifth one is metallic embroidery threads. In this polyester continuous filament embroidery threads, as I was saying repeatedly about the pentalobal and trilobal cross sections, have the probability of reflecting light actually. This polyester filament yarns having pentalobal and trilobal cross section has the ability to reflect the light, which makes the yarn or the thread to look brighter or even much brighter than what it is already. So these are the different types of embroidery threads you have to know before doing your embroidery work. And next, what you have to know is the types of needle which we are preferring for hand as well as machine embroidery. Coming to the needle types, we have different needle types for both hand embroidery and machine embroidery. For hand embroidery, there is different numbers of needles where you can prefer the needle according to the requirement. In the machine embroidery, we have different varieties where we have special scarf portion in order to protect the yarn to get damaged. We have designed the machine embroidery needles in a way that it protects the yarn to get damaged, or breakage of the yarn can be avoided by having a special scarf portion in the needle which we are used in machine embroidery. And coming to the types of hand embroidery needles, we have beaded needles where we have a lengthy needle. It is long and thin, which is particularly preferred for doing only beaded embroideries. And one more thing what you have to keep in mind is embroidery is not only done by means of embroidery threads. You can have beads and sequins and other few products are also available made of different embroidery works. One among that is beading work, where you can prefer only beads to do our entire embellishment. For that you can prefer this kind of long and thin needle which makes you feel comfortable in picking up your beads for doing your embroidery work. Second one is chenille needle, which is very sharp and have long eye, where you can use this kind of long eye and sharp tip for doing your embroidery with ribbons. You can guess like the width of the ribbon will be longer, so that it needs to be accommodated in the needle eye, where the needle eye should be larger. For doing this kind of ribbon work embroideries, you can go for chenille needles which is having long eye and a sharp tip. And embroidery needles. Embroidery needle is the common one which we are using in our home for stitching purposes by means of hand. These embroidery needles are medium size needles having sharp tip. And next one is we have quilting needles, which are shorter in length, used for doing quilting works. You might have heard about quilting. If not, I will say you, quilting is nothing but stitching 3 or 4 layers together to get a quilted effect, puffy effect. So for doing this quilting work, you can prefer quilting needles which are very shorter in length, which makes you feel comfortable for stitching the layers together. And we have another type of needle called double tapestry needle, where you have two holes, two eyes, where you can use two different threads at a single time, or you can use two different colored embroidery threads at a single needle, and you can start doing your embroidery work. It reduces your work, or based on your requirement you can choose this kind of double tapestry needles. So these are the main hand embroidery needles which we use for doing our hand embroidery works: beaded needle, chenille needle, embroidery needle, quilting needle, and double tapestry needle. And coming to the machine embroidery needles, is all about, as I said, machine embroidery needles are manufactured in the way it has some special scarf near the eye which protects the yarn getting damaged. So there are different machine needles available for doing our embroidery, namely universal needle, ballpoint needle, denim needle, leather needle, or the most preferred machine needles for doing our embroidery work. This is all about needle types and the needle types that can be used for hand embroidery as well as machine embroidery. The most important one what you have to keep in mind is like for what kind of work, what kind of thread or the needle you have to choose. This fabric, thread and needle should go hand in hand to do smooth embroidery. What I'm coming to say is, if you have your fabric in hand, you have to analyze the type of material, whether it is a cotton or synthetic or some other. According to the type of material you have in your hand, you have to choose the needle number, like whether you can go for thin needle or thick needle, or with finer eye or larger eye, that you have to choose. According to the needle, you have to choose your thread, because you have the high portion of the needle where you have to decide which eye has to be chosen for the type of thread you have chosen. Suppose this if you are going to start your embroidery with cotton embroidery threads, if the cotton embroidery threads are having 6 strands together, if you wish to do all 6 strands together in your embroidery work, you have to choose the needle which are larger in size, which is larger in eye part, so that it accommodates all the 6 strands together in a neat manner to do your embroidery work. Here you have to use your common sense for combining these 3 aspects: fabric, thread and the needle. And one more thing what you have to keep in mind is the fabric color. According to the fabric color, you have to decide the embroidery thread color. Because if your fabric color is blue You should not go with the blue shades of embroidery thread to do the embroidery on this blue fabric, which makes the embroidery to look dull. As I said in the initial class, this fabric color and the embroidery thread color should be contrast to one another, which makes the embroidery to look beautiful. As I insisted in today's class, embroidery threads connects the people by attracting the people. It makes the people to get attracted to purchase the product. So you should be very conscious in selecting your embroidery thread according to the color of the fabric. And also according to the thread you have chosen, you should know what kind of needle matches to accommodate the threads which you have chosen. For finer fabrics, you should go with fine needle with fine threads. Why I am saying this is, suppose if you are going to do embroidery on a light, finer, thinner cotton material, your material will be very light. It will be very lace material, where you should prefer only a thin needle, so that it pierces the fabric accordingly and do the embroidery in a neat manner. If you are preferring a coarser needle for finer fabric, what it happens, this coarser needle pierces the fabric and makes a big hole in order to pierce the fabric, so that it comes out of the fabric to do the embroidery. It is not the case. It should not make a big hole and makes the embroidery odd. So it is very important to choose the combination of these three: fabric, thread and needle. So in general, what you can have in mind is, for finer fabric you can go for finer needle and finer threads. For coarser fabric you can go for coarser needle and coarser thread, which makes the embroidery good. Color combination and design combination is all the designers' creativity and uniqueness, that up to their mark to choose the designs, but it will be better if the designs are unique and the color chosen is matching with the fabric accordingly. So these are the things you have to keep in mind while selecting your embroidery threads for doing your embroidery work, and also the type of needle you have to be concentrated for doing your machine or the hand embroidery. Let me show you the hand embroidery needles which you can prefer for doing your embroidery work. Here I have a different needle sizes which are available for doing different embroidery works. See, here you can find a larger eye part which can be preferred for doing ribbon embroidery, and also this needle is very dense and coarse, where you can prefer this needle for thicker materials. On thicker materials, if you are planning to do your ribbon work, you can go for this kind of needles, where embroidery can be achieved in a neat manner. And we are having some more needle types, where I was not able to show it out. It was smaller needles which can be preferred for quilting works. We have normal embroidery needles which are smaller eye, where you can prefer for 2 strands or 3 strand embroideries. So this is what, there are different types of needles. According to the needle types, you have to be ready with the type of fabric and the thread which we are going to prefer. So as I repeatedly saying, you have to be conscious in the combination of these three, like fabric, this needle and the thread combinations. And we are left out with one more topic called various surface ornamentation technique. So it is not like only hand embroidery or machine embroidery or considered as the embellishment techniques. We have much more surface embellishment techniques other than this hand and machine embroidery that we are going to see in the next class. Thank you.